Today's our critical thought day, and I think this is the only day in which we could in which we could fit a really cool presentation like the one we're about to see. Anyway, yeah, welcome to Darwin Week. Darwin Week is put on by the UNI Free Thinkers and Inquirers. My name is Corey Derringer, and I'm the Vice President of Unify. Unify is a group of students, secular students, who like to promote science and reason and secular values in what we do, and in events like Darwin Week. We like to think that we're carrying on the tradition of Darwin and challenging not only our own beliefs, or not only the beliefs of others and ideas of others, but our own beliefs as well. You will find on your seat rating cards. Please fill those out and drop them off on the tables on your way out. That just gives us a little bit of audience feedback and helps us decide which direction to take Darwin Week in the future. Our next speaker is Zachary Paige. Zachary Paige has traveled all over the Midwest performing magic and mentalism demonstrations for corporate and professional audiences for the past 15 years. Using a combination of sleight-of-hand, theatrical, and psychological tools, Zachary works in cooperation with his audiences to create powerful psychic illusions that must be experienced to be believed. While pursuing an education in psychology and philosophy at the University of Northern Iowa, Zachary has begun lecturing on the role that critical and creative thinking play in the performance art of magic. By synthesizing philosophical and scientific understanding with his experiences as a corporate mentalist, Zachary hopes to impassion others to become more sophisticated critical thinkers and open them to a world rarely discussed due to the strict codes of secrecy. Please join me in welcoming Zachary Paige to Darwin Week 2011.
All right, thank you all. Thank you so much, Corey, for that wonderful introduction I wrote. Today I'm going to go quickly through about 15 minutes of my hour-long stage show to sort of give you guys an understanding of what it is that we do. And then I'm going to go ahead and lead this little lecture on sort of initiating you into the world of psychic entertainment, because there's a lot of controversy over whether or not that should be allowed or shouldn't. I have to be very careful because there's a couple of organizations that I've already been kicked out of because they're very hush-hush about this type of thing. So without further ado, let's do some magic. Are you ready? Okay. I started out in magic doing little psychological tricks, okay? And I found that I had this sort of uncanny ability to help people or lead people down a particular path so that I could dictate sort of what item they might choose. So I want to give you a little demonstration of that today. What I have here is 4 envelopes, okay? And they're labeled nicely for us, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask 3 people in the audience to select one of those numbers, and then you get to keep that envelope. Okay? No matter what's inside, you get to keep that. Are you ready? Okay. How about you, sir? Would you please select 4, 3, 2, or 1? Choose one of those now. 4. Now, is there any particular reason that were you drawn to that number for any particular reason?
No, it was on the end, so I thought it would be one that you wouldn't have pre-picked out.
Oh, I see. So he thought maybe I would have thought that one. Okay. Well, we'll see here in a minute. Now, I've got 1, 2, and 3 left. Okay, you, sir, would you like 1, 2, or 3?
2.
2. Now, that was towards the back. I was kind of hiding that a little bit. Did that influence you at all? No. Nothing like that? Okay, go ahead. Now, I've got 1 and 3 left. You, sir, would you pick 1 or 3? Which would you like? 1. Now, there again, that was in the front. I moved it to the front. You're right. So you're thinking maybe I was trying to force that one or get you to think that was too obvious? Here we go. Now, believe it or not, earlier today I put a little piece of paper inside each one of these envelopes with a prediction about what might happen in the show. Now, I know it seems amazing, but believe it or not, earlier today I knew for a fact that that envelope would be yours. Okay? Now, I know it seems a little crazy, but why don't you tear it open? It's only a 15-minute show. Go ahead and take it. Joking amongst friends. Okay, now please, could you open the business card maybe? And please read aloud the prediction.
Yours.
Please hold your applause to the end first. Now, believe it or not, earlier today I had a similar sort of just psychic impression in my head, and I just knew that that envelope would be yours. Would you please go ahead and open it up and see what's inside and then read aloud the prediction? You, sir, go ahead and open yours up. I know it seems crazy. I promise I don't use my powers for good. But I had this belief that that envelope would be yours.
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 Now, does anybody want to take a guess as to what's written inside of my envelope?
Mine.
Now, I thought... Okay, that's all right. This is a discussion to critical thinkers, I had an idea that you might think that. So I decided to up the ante a little bit, because I was so sure that this demonstration would work, that you're right, it does say mine, and I wrote it on a $50 bill. Thank you very much. You guys did great. You'd have money, but I'm a college student, okay? That 50 is precious right now. It's going right back to the bank after the show. I'm going to do something a little sort of out of character for magicians. Is typically there's supposed to be this sort of logical progression through the demonstrations. But I really wanted to give you some demonstrations that we could talk about a little bit later and maybe in the Q&A. So I'd really like to try something now. In philosophy, there's this problem that people refer to as the mind-body problem. And it's this question of, if the mind is immaterial and the body is physical, how can there really be a connection? How can they talk to one another? Doesn't everything have to be one or the other? Now, the guy who created this sort of idea was a guy by the name of Descartes. And he thought that the sort of seat of cognition was in the pineal gland. Now, I'm not so sure that the mind is located there, but we do know a lot more about that gland now. And we know that it sort of regulates our body's biological clocks. In fact, we all have a circadian rhythm that puts us on our 24-hour time clock. People get jet lag occasionally, and that's basically a problem with your systems. You sort of get backlogged. Anybody sort of experienced this before? A little bit? Not one person has ever been on a plane. It's okay. I'm going to need a couple of volunteers to help me out. Would you mind helping me out, ma'am? I promise it'll be fun. Come on, give her a round of applause. You're doing fantastic. What I have here is a little envelope, and I have a business card inside it. And what I would like you to do is, oops, just about left my pen. I want you to think of any time of day. Okay? It could be maybe if you know the time that you were born, maybe that time. Otherwise, it could be 3 o'clock when we just started here. Whatever time you'd like. I'd like you to just write it on that card. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to need another volunteer from the audience. Let's get somebody over here. Do you want to help me out? Go on. Come on up stage. Give a round of applause. Your name is Michael. Nice to meet you, Michael. And your name is?
Summer.
Summer. Nice to meet you. Okay, could I have the card back? You can face down, however. Okay. Now, would you like to lick that envelope for me a little bit?
Sure.
Go ahead and just step right on top. Oh, perfect. That's always the way it is. It's all right. I tasted it before the show. It was fine. Now, in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you keep concentrating on the time of day that you're thinking of, right? If you do something at that particular time, maybe visualizing what you might be doing would help. And what I would like you to do is sort of examine this watch. You can sort of see that the dials work, right, when I turn it one way or the other. Now, in a minute, I'm going to have you take this watch, and I'm going to have you hold it sort of face down, okay? And then what I want you to do is try to get her impression, okay? Whatever she thinks. Sorry, let's push that in. And if you sort of feel an impression, I want you to stop. If not, just keep turning the dial. Okay, you ready? Go ahead and hold it nice and firm in your hand, keep it face down, and go ahead and begin turning whenever you'd like. Now again, if you don't feel anything in particular, you can just stop whenever you'd like. Otherwise, twist to your heart's content. Frontwards, backwards. Now, ma'am, could I borrow the pen here? And again, your name was, I'm sorry?
Summer.
Summer? I don't know, it's winter, maybe that's why it threw me off a little bit. Okay, what I'd like you to do is concentrate on your time and try to send it over to this man over here, and I'm going to see if I can't pick up on that. I know it's a little... I'm going to make a guess, okay? The thing is, if I'm close, if I'm within, I don't know, maybe 20 hours. You get what you pay for it, you know what I'm saying? Okay. Okay. I'm committed now. Are you finished?
I'm finished.
Okay, go ahead and push the button in.
I got it.
Oh, you push it? Okay, good. Now, Summer, this is important. What I would like you to do, only you knew what time you wrote down. You didn't meet with me before the show, we didn't work anything out, anything like that, correct? Okay. Summer, what I'd like you to do, in a nice theatrical stage voice, please let everyone know what time you wrote down.
8:45.
8:45. Is that AM or PM?
PM.
PM. She's a night owl. Okay. It's gonna be all right. I'll save this, trust me. That's kind of amazing. Is there any particular reason you thought of that particular time? Nothing else? Just first thing that popped into your head. That's amazing because that's exactly what I wrote. Now, some people are a little bit skeptical. Magician, right? I get that. not really wanting to trust me, but I think what would be really amazing is if you stopped anywhere at all close to 8:45.
It says, yeah.
It's about 8:47. That's amazing, fantastic. Give these guys a round of applause. I'm going to leave this set up here, but keep in mind that in a half hour it will be off by a half hour. I've been burned by that one before. What I would like to do now is sort of take a little mental break and just do a quick little card trick for you. Would that be okay? Yep. Okay. It's been said that the sort of purest card trick that a person could do would just be to point at somebody in the audience, tell them to think of a card, and just name the card that they're thinking without any sort of extra hurrah. Would that not be an amazing trick?
It would.
I think it would be. Yes. Would that not be an amazing trick?
It would.
Yeah! Woo! Now they're behind me. Okay. I need someone who, how about you? Would you like to help me out?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What I want you to do is concentrate. Try to clear your mind as best you can.
Okay.
You know the values, the faces and the values of all
I
the cards?
do.
Okay, good. You'd be amazed at how many times I get to the end of this trick and find out that I didn't check on that before, and then the trick doesn't go so well. What I would like you to do is think of any card in the deck of cards.
Okay.
You've got one firmly in mind?
Got it.
Now I want you to do something else. I want you to change it to another card. Change it to something else.
Okay.
I know. Okay. So now you're thinking of a card that even you didn't know you'd be thinking of
Yeah.
right now.
Correct.
Would it be amazing if I just named that card right now?
Yeah, I'd freak out.
It's 152. That's a powerful 152.
Uh-huh.
Phil. Short for Philip. Said I'd name it. You're a little skeptical. Now, you were probably thinking of like a suit and a value. Is that correct? Of a card?
What do you mean?
Like a suit, like a clubs, hearts, spade, diamonds, and an ace, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8. Now, why don't you go ahead and tell me what card you were thinking of?
First or second?
The second one.
4 of clubs.
4 of clubs. Now, I'll show you. I have these cards, and on the back of them are written a bunch of names. We've got Jean, Jake, Jane, Buck, Alan, Rose, Bud, Sven, Jill, Don, Mona, Lisa, Jim. Okay, a bunch. But you said the 4 of clubs,
I
right?
did.
Now, if we go through here, I'm sure it's the 4 of clubs is included in this particular deck of cards. And like I said, that's Phil.
Oh my God.
Thanks so much. We're gonna move now to the pièce de résistance, the big finale here, right? I like to have a good. That's the magician. You can't get the cards back in the box. About a week ago, I met with some of the members of the Darwin Week group, the Unify group, and they wanted me to try to do a headline prediction. Yes.
It was like a month ago.
Oh, a month ago. Sorry. Okay, so it was about a month ago. And we met. My mentor in magic is based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And he's a recognized llama, and so he does a lot of things with trying to predict or make forecasts about racing horses, these types of gambling demonstrations, and also the headlines. So I met with them. They took all their names and they wrote them down on this sheet of paper. And on top of their names, I wrote some ideas that I had about what the Waterloo Courier's headline would be today. I then gave that to, I think they've been passing it around amongst themselves, but somebody has had that in their possession all the way up until today, and including just seconds before the show, I held open this envelope, they placed it inside, and it's been there in full view now since the beginning of the show. What I would like to do is invite the members of the Unify group that were with us, or other members of Unify that are here that can vouch for the names, to join me up on stage. Thank you so much. Now, the envelope, sir, I don't want to touch the piece of paper inside. Please pull it out. And would you please read what is written there as best you can? That's right. You need me to help you out? Let's see, what is it? Sorry.
Is that a heart?
That's a heart.
Okay. He, heart, you and I, dreams big, athletics complex, no money.
Okay, now just a second here. What was the first part?
He, heart, you and I.
Helium hearts. At the top of the page it says helium heart, so I wrote he heart, helium hearts. Okay, the next part is?
You and I, dreams big, athletics complex.
Oh, lesson plans. You and I administrators always dreamed big. It's a little close, a little off a little bit. What?
Athletics complex,
Athletics complex.
no money.
Oh, won't get state aid. Athletic complex won't get state aid. Thank you all very much. I hope that was close enough to be impressive. Okay, that's my show, folks. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed yourself. A quick 15 minutes of magic, as fast as I could cram them in there and still be entertaining. We're going to move on now to my quick little lecture, and I'm going to try to fit in 20 years of knowledge into just 15 minutes. So bear with me. Of course, the title of the demonstration is Critical Magic, Psychics, Charlatans, and Entertainers. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about basically why Unify thought to include a lecture on magic, given the fact that I'm the only member of the group that doesn't have a PhD. And then we're going to discuss what magic is, what mentalism is. I'm going to talk about the distinction that is the subtitle of the demonstration about what's the difference between a psychic, a charlatan versus an entertainer. Then I'm going to sort of give you some vocabulary and talk about the controversies that are sort of happening behind the scenes in the magic fraternity to sort of initiate you guys into this world that everybody thinks needs to be kept secret or we'll all die or something. And then I'm going to make some recommendations for how we can proceed after this. Okay, what I noticed when I started performing magic is regardless of whether I did a really good show or a really terrible show, two people would come up to me at the end of every show. The first one was the one who had sort of a belief in the psychic or paranormal before they came to the show, and my show convinced them even more that what they saw was real. This stuff is happening, and they just needed somebody to really get in their face and really do it. And now they're really convinced. And inevitably they think that I have a pact with God or the devil based on whether or not they like the fact that there's psychic stuff or don't like the fact that there's psychic stuff. The other person was somebody who'd come up and they'd say, typically they were a skeptic, and they'd say, yeah, I know what you did was sort of fake, all these jokes, this type of personality, but I know this guy, and he was able to levitate. He was doing something that I just know wasn't what you did, you know what I mean? It's the classic, my friends say, yeah, your card tricks are really good, but Chris Angel, man, he's doing something different. Chris Angel. The other thing, of course, is all the media coverage. There's so many TV shows now, Ghost Hunters, Taps, all these different ones. There's a new TV show on primetime cable called The Mentalist, which is finally making people have any idea what the word mentalism means, which we kind of like. There's also a movie that just came out called Paranormal Activity. And then, of course, there's always been a host of TV psychics. Your James Van Proggs, Sylvia Brown, John Edwards, the crossing over, talking to the dead guy. So what is magic? Magic, the term magic can be used in two senses. In one sense, it's sort of what the performer does. And of course, it's a performance art that's sort of characterized by sleight of hand, illusion, trickery, lies. It takes communication skills, theatrics, and these types of things. However, magic can also be used to describe an experience that happens in the minds of the audience. We refer to the term, for example, movie magic, right? It's not magic exactly, but it creates a magic experience in your mind when you watch it. And so that's another way that we can use the term magic. And of course, this is characterized by feelings of astonishment, wonder, or impossibility. A lot of people, after they see a magic trick, they'll say, no way. And what they mean is, for my philosophy brethren, that there's no efficient causality. There's no way, there's no cause that precipitated that event. It must have just happened. It must have just been magic. So what is mentalism? Mentalism is a particular subdivision of magic that focuses on psychic demonstrations or demonstrations of enhanced cognitive ability. Mental influence, rapid memorization, rapid mathematical calculations, telepathy, all these types of things. One very important thing is that most people believe or are likely to believe that your demonstrations are legitimate, which is quite a bit different than a normal magic act. If somebody pulls a rabbit out of a hat, for example, few people believe that the person conjured a rabbit out of nothing. They don't know how it's done, but they don't. Whereas if I give you a choice between 1 or 4 envelopes, you're pretty likely to believe, I bet if he studied psychology enough, he could probably force, he could get whatever one he wanted to be left, right? So for example, if somebody reaches out and pulls out a coin from thin air, right? You're less likely to believe, how did he transmute air into metal? You're more likely to say, where was he hiding it and how long has it been there, right? So that's sort of the big key distinction, is that in mentalism, that's what people believe in. We as entertainers capitalize on this fact, and we put an emphasis on legitimacy and using less props. There's an old cliche that says, for every new type of item that you add to your show, the price you can charge goes down by $50. So psychics and charlatans, the distinction. A psychic would be somebody who obtains information other than by their 5 senses or logical inference. These types of psychics are breaking down into 2 types. A real psychic, somebody who can actually do that. Notice I have a note that it's possible they don't exist. And then those who think they're psychic, but they're just wrong about it. These are in contrast to a charlatan who's a con artist. This person knows what they're doing, they know how they're accomplishing their tricks, and they're lying and manipulating you for their own personal gain, be it stroking their egos or making money or what have you. Con artists are the unethical ones. They're the ones who are worthy of your hatred and sort of animosity, whereas the people who think they are but aren't typically have very good intentions. They just lack the critical thinking skills necessary to really get to the bottom of what they're doing. Many people who think they're psychics and sort of get shown that they're not often say, wow, I never really thought of it that way. Right? They just didn't. They didn't have the skills to go, oh yeah, that might be what's going on. Into the vocabulary. This is sort of the nuts and bolts of the discussion. First and foremost, we can use stooges, plants, or confederates. It is not beyond an entertainer to just walk up to somebody and say, in the middle of my show, I'm going to ask you to think of anything, think of the word apple. If I ask you if we set anything up, say no. Right? That's an entertainment technique, which is fine if you do it within the guise of entertainment. But if you're really trying to manipulate people as a con artist would, then it becomes more unethical. A billet. This is a small piece of paper on which something is written. So you can mark, as soon as you have any item in your hand, if you write something on it, at that second it becomes a billet, as far as magicians and mentalists are concerned. At this point, you can do anything you want with it. All sleight of hand comes in when a billet is in the mix. First and foremost, there's this term called a peek or a glimpse. This is secretly obtaining the information that was just written down. Most of mentalism revolves around this principle. It's getting information without you realizing that I'm getting the information. It's reading your body language, whatever you have to do to get information. We can also do this with psychological trickery. We can use misdirection. I like to use the term direction since that's what it is. Suggestion is the new buzzword that we're throwing around. My mentor refers to this as neuro-linguistic programming, which is just a big word to sound really impressive. But it's really nothing different than what poets and philosophers and politicians have been doing for centuries. It's using words to create an impression in your mind. If I can do that to make you think of a particular card or increase the chances of you thinking of a particular card, so much the better. Then, of course, the good old cold reading. The 2 effects that we refer to help people understand exactly what cold reading is the Barnum effect and the Forer effect, both named after the people who sort of created these ideas. Barnum, of course, short for P.T. Barnum, Barnum Bailey Circus. He had 2 quotes. One is, there's a sucker born every minute, and the other was that a good circus should have something for everyone. That relates to the Forer effect. I forget the gentleman's first name, but Forer back in the 40s, late 40s, basically gave his students in his psychology course a personality test. They were supposed to be very detailed and answer all these questions. He took them back, and him and a whole host of grad students went through the motions and developed these really sophisticated personality profiles for the students. They were then given back to the students, and they were asked to rate how well they related to the person. How much does this fit you? Is it a stretch or not? Most people gave a rating of like 4.5 out of 5. It was very high. Then he announced, of course, that he had given everybody the same profile. And this was known as the fallacy of personal validation. We sort of take out what we want, we take what hits, and then we just sort of forget the things that fall by the wayside. And then lies. Hey, we're entertainers. That's the big thing that I'm trying to sort of make a point. If it's entertainment, and you're being honest about entertainment, these things wouldn't necessarily be a problem. But I think they do become a problem when you step into one of the other categories. So these are the controversies sort of going on behind the scenes. How am I doing on time? Does anybody have a clock up there? Mine doesn't work anymore. Good, lots, good. The first one is secrecy. There's a big question of, is secrecy or belief in what we're doing necessary to be entertained? If I were to expose to you directly how I did the headline prediction, the yours and mine, or the watch trick, would that make you less entertained? The next big question, of course, is are the psychics, meaning the people who are con artists, who are real psychics who think they are but aren't, are they really using the same techniques that a mentalist is using? A lot of mentalists believe that our techniques are sort of better, right? And that real psychics aren't using these techniques. So exposing them will hurt the art form, but won't do anything really towards making people better critical thinkers, because you won't see this. And there's just a huge debate going on right now inside the magic fraternity as to whether or not that's the case. And sort of because our ethical place in the whole system is linked to that. So the next thing is on disclaimers. At the beginning and end of my show, I give disclaimers. I also make sure to include card tricks and things that sort of scream magic during the middle of it, because I think that helps people sort of lighten the load a little bit. And it takes away from the, oh, this guy's a psychology grad student, he's been studying this for 20 years. All that stuff increases my legitimacy. It seems like, well, a psychologist wouldn't be lying to us. He must have knowledge. And I think that, if, knock on wood, I get a PhD, that would increase my ethical responsibility even more. There's no cliche by a radio mentalist by the name of Dunninger who said, for those who believe, no explanation is necessary. For those who do not, none will suffice. Now, it's possible that that's just an old theatrics, cliche, I'm not sure. But as mentalists, we refer to him as the originator. And of course, that means that the believers in the show say, of course he has to say that. If he didn't say that, then scientists and everybody would be barking at his door. They'd be wanting him to cure the sick and whatnot. Whereas the skeptics in the group will say, he's telling you he's lying. What more do you want? So then, this comes back then, does believability, does the fact that more people inherently believe in mentalism demonstrations increase the ethical responsibility of the performer? I think that it does, but a lot of people think that it doesn't. Oh, how do I go back? Oh, with the NOP. So what's a critical thinker to do? Given all this information, the fact that it's going to be very hard for you to get knowledge of magic, and the fact that maybe the magic knowledge isn't what's being used out there, what can you do to make sure that you don't fall victim to, there's this guy I saw one time, or you must have a pact with the devil? So here's my sort of quick down and dirty advice. First, you have to remember, what is the context? It's the easiest to figure out whether or not it's entertainment. If you're going to see an entertainer, know that regardless of what he says, regardless of his classifications or his experience or anything, he's lying to you because all he cares about is entertaining you for a few minutes. It's taking you away from everything else to just give you a moment of, I feel good, and hopefully they'll accomplish that. So is it entertainment, religious event, or a sales pitch? Obviously that changes what you were going to require before you believe it. Then you've got to ask yourself, what is the claim? Is the person really stating a fact? I can do this? Are they stating a belief? I just have a strong belief that people can communicate between minds? Or are they asking a question? A lot of the controversies that come up between, quote, real psychics and skeptics is over this misunderstanding. A lot of times the skeptic or the critical thinker is holding themselves to a higher standard than might be the psychic. And so if you sort of explain to them, this is what I'm requiring before you say that, the person might say, they might not, of course, but they might go, oh, I see what you're saying. So keep that in mind. Then, of course, what's the risk? A good cost-benefit analysis. If you believe what this person is saying, and it turns out you're wrong, was it just, are you just going to look like a fool? Is there money on the line? Is your own personal health on the line for believing in something? All of these things are going to increase, as a critical thinker, what you're going to expect before you accept the claim. Last but not least, be critical but not cynical. So many people are cynical towards these things, and I've become a lot more open-minded, given that my mentor is a recognized Lama, that people really do believe in these claims. And I think it's okay for them to believe that, as long as they're being open and honest about their claim. So few are that it's very easy to be cynical. A critical thinker approaches somebody else where they are. A cynical thinker approaches somebody else where I am. And so you, as a critical thinker, you want to really try to ruminate on these questions, use all the knowledge that you have available to you, and formulate an opinion. But you want to avoid being overly cynical, because that's going to sort of breed just hatred and anti-intellectualism, really. It's just going to close the doors. So with that in mind, I would like to place a couple of references up, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed the discussion and got something out of it. And we're going to have some Q&A now.
Okay, yeah, we have time for, we have quite a bit of time for Q&A. So I'll bring the microphone to you. Just raise your hand if you have a question. Okay.
Don't need the mic. Is there anything in the little envelope on the table?
Two things. One, almost assuredly there is, right? But two, I'm gonna try as best as I can not to expose any actual method. But keeping in mind clearly that yes, everything happens behind closed doors. So I think, but it's an interesting question because so many people bring it up. But you knew the answer to that before, you know what I mean? So, or
not really.
Well, you hoped you knew the answer. You thought, if it's not that, then the guy's real, right? So.
I was just wondering if you could give some advice on how to remain critical and what we should do to participate on their terms but still stay objective.
Yeah. I think the first thing, one of the reasons why this hits close to home for me is that my mother is a psychic. She follows the Native American religion, and she has an ancient Native American spirit guide that gives her information that she couldn't have gotten any other way, technically, so supposedly rather. And so I think a good thing to do as a critical thinker is to find out what's the purpose behind them telling you this. So somebody walks up to you and says, I can read your mind. Okay, psychics exist. You might ask them, well, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to say that the scientific community has been pushing out psychic phenomena and not studying it? They've been distancing themselves from it, and they've been keeping it down? If that's what their claim is, then you can sort of go from there, right? And say, well, there's all this data that suggests that there actually is scientific data on psychic phenomena. It's referred to as psi, or anomalous cognition, in the literature. Now, of course, it's very, very, very debated. But its existence shows that it's not really a good argument to say that science is pushing it out, right? It's there. It's just not very well developed. So I think that's a good starting point, is finding out what's the purpose behind this person's claim. How have you confronted this person? If you're trying to debunk them, like a Houdini did, all through the 20s and 30s and whatnot, he went to Congress, to try to get all these charlatans taken down. Then you can do that. You can expose them. Find out what trick they're doing, and figure out how it's done, which won't cost you more than $15, and then, say, here's the book you learned that from. But again, it's essential to figure out why they're making this claim, or why they're believing this. They might just say, you know what, it's a part of my spiritual person. I find meaning in believing in this. And if that's the case, then I don't see that that's a particularly, if you don't believe that, don't believe it. But, you can't fight every battle. I don't know if that's good or not.
Houdini and James Randi both receive a lot of flack for some of their debunking. Randi says that he's a skeptic and not a debunker. Now, what do you see as a good border of ethical debunking?
Phenomenal question, and this has kept me up at nights. I've gotten out of magic professionally on numerous occasions because I didn't know how to answer that question. But here's what I'll say. I think that we can't bend on the fact that as soon as you come off stage, the act and everything has to come away. If you're not in front of an audience, then you have to be very open. If somebody says, did you really predict the newspaper headline? You have to look right at them and say, it's a trick. I think you're ethically required to say that. And if you don't, off stage, then you're lying, right? And because you've now become a charlatan. Now you know how you did what you did because you've got specialized knowledge, but you're tricking other people into thinking that you don't have that you didn't use that technique. So I think that's the first thing. And then the other thing would be really sort of deciding for yourself what type of what role do you want to play in that process. I think it's okay to debunk when you have clear evidence that the person is lying to others, right? When you can classify somebody as being in the charlatan category, I think that's okay. I don't think it is okay to just sort of cram debunking down somebody's throat. You know, we're not just going to all start going to religious ceremonies where they pray and just run in there and start saying, this prayer doesn't do anything, right? I have this scientific evidence that shows it doesn't do anything, so I'm going to say this, right? So I think attacking people where they're at isn't a good thing. But if somebody is in a public forum and they're making a claim and continuing to maintain it when you have clear evidence to the contrary, I think you're ethically, maybe not ethically required, but certainly ethically within the clear to say, I don't believe that, and this is what I think you're doing, and I think it's wrong that you're convincing others that you're not doing it that way.
I'm not sure I need the mic. I'm intrigued by cold reading.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you do it or if you're willing to demonstrate it, but
Sure.
it seems fascinating to me.
Right. I can talk quite a bit about it. I'm not, here's what I found out for myself, just to put my personal self into the character that I portray on stage, which is not phenomenally different than my own. I found that I cannot do demonstrations that I don't feel are ethically acceptable. Cold reading is one, right? I've studied it a lot, and I've been to many lectures on it, so I can talk in a second here about how it works and what it is and how people are using it. But I don't do it during my shows, except to a very, very small extent, because it's so good. And what I mean by good is it's so effective in convincing people that you're real, that no amount of, Penn and Teller are famous about this. Teller is actually the one who's really sort of, I don't want to, the brains behind the operation. I mean, he used to teach Latin, and I mean, he's very well trained, and he's probably the best cold reader on the planet. When he does it, even the skeptics in the room go, no way is he using cold reading. So here's sort of the basic idea. The first thing you do is you start broad and get specific. So you begin by, like the talking to the dead people. I'm getting an impression over here that somebody has recently had a loved one who died. Now, of course, in a skeptical group, that's going to sort of be funny almost, right? But with lay audiences, that hits because it's so important to us when we have a loved one die. I mean, those are the most important events that happen in our lives. And so people know, and you can see from 16 miles who you just hit on. Somebody within the last week had somebody die, and now you know. So now I started broad, now I've gotten real specific, but I'm gonna hold on to that piece of information. I already know she's struggling with this issue. So now I'm going to pretend like I didn't see it and go on over here and have some misses, right? And then say, God, I don't understand. Is it Jake? Did Jake die? Did John? I don't know. And all that questioning, you're just getting yourself down. Now, every time you make a comment, you're keeping an eye on her because she knows it, and you're just going to start saying, Jake, John, Frank, Sally, was it your mother? Was it your father? And you're just waiting for her to go, he's reading me. He's right here on me, right? And just keep getting more and more specific. You might do this for as long as you have. Like John Edwards, his TV show, they would tape for 6, 7, 8 hours and then cut it down to an hour because it takes 5 hours to go, Adam, Alfred. and then they cut it down. And so you're just waiting, you're picking up on this information. The only way that I use a type of cold reading in my show is, it's a classic effect. You sort of have people write either the name of a loved one or their biggest phobia on a sheet of paper. Now they all crumble it up, throw it on the ground, and step on it. Now this is just a really old sort of icebreaker, I think, even in different classrooms. But you can tell from the back of the room which one of those people are concentrating on a loved one and which ones are concentrating on a phobia. Because the phobia, you're going to get, just going to go crazy on that piece of paper. But the loved one, they're just going to kind of drop it, kind of step a little bit, just kind of be awkward, right? And now you've got some piece of information that you can use at your leisure, right? So that's sort of how cold reading works. It gets so specific and so effective when you get really down to it.
If somebody knows you're doing this, can they fake you out?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and that's been done numerous times. Penn and Teller's TV show BS. They do this. I mean, there's tons of Dateline 2020 things where they'll get some guy who's got a real long beard and real long hair and everything. They'll have him go in, all scruffy-haired looking, and get a tarot card reading, because tarot card reading is cold reading. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. Get a reading, have somebody do that, and then they take that same guy, take him out, give him a shower, cut off all his hair, shave his beard, the same guy goes right back in. And of course, now, oh, how's your wife doing? Oh, your job, you're traveling a lot for your job, and these types of things. And it does, because you're reading the cues that are there, And we all have to do this. We are all cold readers. We meet somebody, we get first impressions of them. We sort of say, how's this what's this person doing? We just don't frame it like that, It's very uncommon for me to say, to look at you and see how you're. Oh, you're a very laid back kind of guy, right? There you go. Right?
What was your clue?
Right. So ordinarily you wouldn't do that. I would just know that. I would just know here's a guy that's relatable, right, or what have you. Here's this, that, or everything. You're just making claims about someone. That's cold reading.
Zach, I just wondered what we should conclude from the fact that when you said you were hoping to get a PhD, you knocked on wood.
It's an expensive, long, arduous process, and I hope to get there.
No, but what I'm asking is, do you believe that knocking on wood is related to the likelihood?
Oh! I totally missed that joke, but thank you for pointing it out. At this point in my education, I'm willing to try pretty much anything to make that. To be honest. So,
I'm just joking with you.
no, I get it. It's nice.
Other questions?
Anything else? We have some time. Oh.
One more. And any idea of why, well, I guess James Randi offers like $1 million if anybody could proof in the psychic abilities, paranormal, and everything from dowsing rods to and such. But what possible? Well, like Sylvia Brown and many others, they say like, oh yeah, we'll take the challenge, but they never do. But now supposedly the process that he has is pretty guarded. Do you have any ideas what some of his progress of analyzing to get scientific fact of what people actually have in these?
It's actually not that guarded, and usually it's pretty easy, right? His requirements, everybody always claims that they're so rigorous, even a real psychic couldn't do it, which I think is funny in itself. But dowsing is one of the most famous sort of psychic abilities that people have. And it used to be a way that people actually tried to get water. Luckily, the earth is almost covered in it, so it's affected a lot of times. But what he would do is somebody would say, I can take these rods and I can find water. So he'd say, okay, could you do that for me? Right? And he'll just put 4 styrofoam cups on a table. One of them will have water. He'll take 4 other big cups and put them over top so that you just can't tell which one it is. And he'll say, find it greater than 25% of the time, and you win $1 million.
Okay. I was more relating it to the psychic and mentalist.
Yeah, I mean, so if the big thing is that if somebody, it's going to be specific to the claim, but it's going to just put, if you YouTube his name, there was a TV show, I don't even know what it was, sometime back in the 70s, where there was this guy who was studying karate, and he had all this Eastern religion going behind him, and he was able to do the thing where he pushed it. And so what happens is he'd open a book, and he would just go, right? And miraculously the pages would flip. Well, James Randi said, I think you're blowing on it, right? That's what the was. So he said, so his highly sophisticated test was, he said, I'm going to put packaging peanuts on the top, right? So now turn the page, given the fact that there's, he didn't even put it on the book, believe it or not, he just put it all around the book. So he said, okay, now just flip the page. And of course, instantaneously, instead of using his method of, he decided to get down real low and just concentrate, and then he couldn't do it, right? And here again, that's why I think you got to be careful, and why sometimes James Randi gets flagged, is because I don't think that guy was a charlatan.
Really?
I don't. And this is just a personal opinion, you can't know. I think that guy really never thought of it that way, and what I think is he probably had an inkling somewhere in his mind that maybe it's the breath, but what he probably thought was, there's no way that I could use that little breath. There's no way that little amount of breath could do it. It's got to be infused with something more. I really think people who believe they have these abilities come up with those types of rationalizations.
Well, that guy ended up going to prison for other frauds.
Oh, well.
There you go. I notice a common trend whenever these such claims are debunked is
Right.
that, like Uri Geller, which is James Randi's favorite, and that fella that you said that you believed was real, they
No, I don't believe he's real. I believe he's fake. He just doesn't know it. But
Oh,
if he's gone to prison for fraud, one can
Yeah.
imagine.
Well, they always come to this term that, oh, it's the negative energy around me. Oh, you're just blocking me. How would you counter that,
Well,
that claim?
some of these claims, again, they're sort of philosophically unprovable, right? And the problem is we end up chasing the psychics. And I don't think we can do that. We have to just stand firm. Make your claim, tell me what you can do, tell me the circumstances under which you can do it, and do it, right? Don't go after them, because they're always going to come up with this. And you can't know that. We cannot scientifically prove that negative energy was not a factor. We can calculate it out, as James Randi has done, and say, okay, given the fact that I was in Minnesota and you were in, Timbuktu, that means that the average amount of negative energy, based on your calculation, should be about 1 part per 16 trillion. So if that level of negative energy does in fact hinder your abilities, and it may, because that's an unfalsifiable claim, it's not really, how are we to say that that's not the case? What we can do as critical thinkers is say, really? 1 part in 16 trillion of negative energy? How are they? It's a miracle they're able to do anything at all, given that there's so much more negative energy at a time. So I think that's what you can do. Just get a specific claim out of them. Find out what really can you do. What you'll find out is they won't be able to do it. They won't be able to tell you. They'll have to say, well, I can like fine water. Well, can you like fine water or find it, and under what circumstances? That's what it's really stupid.
We have time for one more. I have a fun one and a serious one.
Okay.
Fun one is, since there's a prediction about the rapture, can you predict the rapture?
Yes, I can. My prediction is that when it happens, everyone will be caught unawares. So let's wait for that one.
That's pretty good. As a former fundamentalist preacher, who's now an atheist, I did the faith healing, I did the casting out of demons, that sort of thing. I agree with your basic premise about critical thinking, entertainment, having clear claims. It seems that the danger is in people who don't make clear claims, who actually believe they are, and they're selling it, pitching it, and what have you. And unfortunately, our society is not really geared toward critical thinking. You're talking to the choir here. But if we went into the general public and said, critical thinking, they would look at you like you were speaking in another language, speaking in tongues like I used to. But anyway, in another language. I literally was on a radio show where a Christian got on and said, I have to put aside my critical thinking to have faith. Oh, that's where the danger comes in with these things. I'd like you to comment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. My original distinction, there's a philosopher by the name of Harry Frankfurt who wrote a book called On Bullshit. And what he was saying was that there's sort of a difference, like a bullshitter, pardon the expression, is somebody who doesn't have any, they don't care about the truth, right? They don't even know what it is. Whereas a liar knows the truth and does the opposite. For Frankfurt, the liar was less worrisome because they could at least be shown, you know what I mean? They know what's the truth. They just feel like it's not that important. Like it's okay for them to overstep their bounds. Whereas the BSer, is lost. So I was trying to make that distinction that people who think they are but aren't, provided they haven't gone all the way towards saying, I can't be a critical thinker, I've got to be this. Now they might be more dangerous, right? Because it seems as though they have lost the ability to think. But for me, people who think they are but aren't do have the ability, and maybe I'm just being overly optimistic, do have the ability to be shown, through critical thinking, through logic, that I think maybe you just haven't looked at this the right way, and what do you say about this? Now, of course, if they get to that point where you're talking about where they've said,
Yeah, I'm going to say, if you're talking to a fundamentalist, you're not going to be able to say, well, let's try to put on your critical thinking hat and look at, is Jesus God?
and if they've abandoned critical thinking, then in my book, by my sort of philosophical terminology, they've then crossed over into a charlatan because they're willfully ignoring facts that they know are out there, alternatives that they know are out there. they're just refusing to accept them or have anything to do with them. So then I think.
Well, that's actually all the time we have for questions, but let's give Zach a hand for